Welcome to the Agency Uplift podcast, all about the unique experience of growing a digital agency, the ups, the downs, the challenges, the learnings, the opportunities. There's so much to unpack. I'm Sean Lang, agency owner for over 7 years and co-founder of Social Commerce Club, and I'm joined by Chris Suglia, founder of Happy Hub Marketing. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Sean. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for being on. We've been connected and engaging with each other's posts on LinkedIn for probably a number of years now, so it's nice to talk shop face to face. Real quick, why don't you just give us a quick rundown of Happy Hub Marketing? Because it's not going to be like every agency that we have on here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Happy Hub Marketing was started about 5 years ago or so. I had worked at a lot of agencies before that, and I'd always had kind of my own ideas of what I wanted to do for marketing. I have a screenwriting and film background, so I always had like I guess you could call cutting edge ideas for creative and videos and things like that. And so once I had enough agency experience, I kind of just decided to jump off and do my own thing. Like I just said, a lot of that was like for content reasons, so I can really just have the freedom to do what I want. But the other part of it was just like how the traditional agencies kind of like interact with clients, kind of how they might manipulate data, and also just not having a a transparent and direct approach to like how they did feedback and like talked about results and performance. And so I thought there would be a way to just, be a little bit more transparent with all of those things. And then on the other side of it, I was on a lot of teams that were just very reactive, very stressed all the time about, just even getting decent performance in. And I thought there would be a way to be proactive, more organized, and kind of, again, with that just transparent, direct feedback with the clients to make marketing very positive and happy thing for everyone. Um, and then do you want me to go in a little bit about kind of the clientele that we serve?
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you think is relevant, because it's all part of it.
Perfect. Yeah, so we serve both direct to consumer B2C clients, and then we do a little bit of nonprofit work. And then on the other side of our business is white label work, where we work specifically with agencies to help them with their paid media programs. We love working with marketers, and then just kind of us as an agency, we do have experience with like the full funnel approach of things, but we really focus on in terms of our services and our expertise on paid media programs and the things that affect those. So like landing pages and offers, and then in the platform, the actual creative that we create for our clients.
Very, very cool. Thanks for breaking that down. So, first question I have right off the bat is, what prompted you to add the sort of the white label side?
Yeah, a lot of it was just we kind of saw like a gap in the marketplace. I think was the first thing where both agencies we would speak to and then in-house teams just had a really difficult time finding like top level paid media talent, hiring for it, and then just like keeping it consistently in their business because it is so expensive to hire like really top talent. And then so I thought that we kind of could like fill that need that was in the market. And then kind of like on the other side, timing wise, that was happening is that we were just having not as much fun working with some of the direct to consumer owners that we had at that time, and we're just having a much better time working directly with agencies, people who kind of just understood a lot of the marketing fundamentals from the get-go, and then we could really just focus on all these proactive, very like forward thinking ideas instead of having to talk about kind of what cost per click is and click through rate and all of that kind of stuff. Since then we have been more picky with the direct to consumer clients we pick, working with people who only make at least 1 million but typically over $2 million in revenue a year, and that has helped get rid of some of that early learnings that like owners have when they're only at like $30,000 of revenue a month or something like that. But yeah, that was kind of the reason for it, to focus on some white label work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. On sort of the going, I'll say slightly up market from the earlier stage clients. That's something that I hear a lot, and something that I experienced as well is the smaller the client, the more time you spend educating the client, which means the less time you can actually spend doing the work for the client because the client doesn't understand the value of the work that you're doing. That's
Exactly.
probably definitely. I would think that that's definitely a benefit of white labeling and working with agencies because they're going to be sophisticated and actually understand what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a lot easier to like move ideas forward and things like that. And not to say that I don't enjoy like educating people who don't know as much, but there also is like another element to it, and just like is the client really ready for paid ads? Do they have
Hmm.
like all the things in place? And that's kind of going back to what you said about time. That's what's the most time consuming element. And so if you don't have to worry about our paid ads going to work and like all those elements that really go into that, which can take months, especially if you don't have like the historic data for it. That just honestly sets the not just the agency and us, but the client up for success better instead of kind of just saying we can do it all and then being in a situation where you're actually losing money because you're spending too much time on things that could argue are out of scope for like a paid media team.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. What are some of the struggles that you encounter on the white label side? Because I think it's pretty common for us to discuss I'll say standard direct to client agencies. Even that's not a
Mhm.
term, but um, those struggles are a little bit more standard. But I'm assuming that you probably have a different set of struggles when you're working with white label clients. Can you kind of walk me through what that looks like?
Yeah. So like there isn't that struggle of like getting strategy approved that you have when working with sometimes like direct to clients. The biggest thing that agencies we work with are looking for is just like consistency, being detail oriented, like making sure there's no grammar mistakes, and really just like saving them time like on the program, because with like any kind of program, whether it's us or like a software tool or something like that, there's always this onboarding period that a lot of times takes more time to just get up and running, and then even after that you're sometimes like looking over mistakes and like sending things back and forth, pushing deadlines out and all that sort of thing. And those like expectations is really what makes that agencies working directly with the brands relationship so good or so bad, if you don't meet those expectations. So having a team where they can actually rely on in terms of, hey, we're going to get things by this date, or at least being proactive and saying like, hey, like we actually have to push it out 2 days, like 2 or 3 days before instead of like on the day of that it's due, so that that agency can actually have a good communication relationship with the client. That's the biggest thing that we see people struggle with when they come to us, and that we're able to kind of like fulfill for them. I think the other thing that we've come up in terms of like, I guess, not taking on agency clients, is that some agencies just don't have high enough margins to really do what's needed for paid media right now. Like we put our pricing very specifically on like how many hours is required to make someone successful. And just with how many things have come up within the past like year or two, like things like creative being so much more important, landing pages being so much more important, um, even just having a strong brand is a lot more important now than it was 3 or 4 years ago when you could just target exactly who you wanted and things like that.
Mhm.
Agencies who were successful 3 or 4 years ago haven't made room for all these other time oriented task services that are now like really important to get like paid media programs off the ground. So that's probably like the biggest like hesitation thing that we see when we speak with other agencies.
So would you say that that's had an effect on your offer? Has your offer changed over time from when you started first offering white labeling to now?
Yeah. When we first started, we would do things like no setup fees, little or like give like free, 3 to 4 graphics or something, or like a free strategy session or a free cup of coffee if you met with us, things like that, that I guess were kind of like standard for like lead generation and getting client calls. But just really kind of like I said, had a hard time closing people because they couldn't really see, I guess I don't want to say like see the full value of the program, but just in terms of like their expenses, they couldn't really wrap their head around it. So what we started doing was offering like a free month for all of the agencies that would work with us. We limit that only to like one a month, just like to keep our kind of like expenses in balance. But that has like really opened people's eyes to just like how quickly we can do paid media, and so our hourly rate doesn't actually look as expensive as it might like upfront without actually seeing that experience. And then kind of like I was saying earlier, like all the logistical stuff is really what's so important to these agencies. Are we actually saving them time? Are we actually like delivering things on deadlines? So having that month to just make them comfortable with like, okay, they're actually like exceeding the expectations that we had for a service like this, that makes the price then again even, make more sense. And that has really like helped us close a lot more clients at the end of the day.
I remember you telling me a while ago on LinkedIn about the free month, and it's definitely a really surprising tactic. Do you find that that sort of plays into the law of reciprocity? I guess if you find a really good partner and you've done some work for them for free, do you find that it generally leads to a good long term partnership?
Yeah, we were a little, nervous about it in the beginning, but when I go through like all of our numbers, we have about like a 3.5 return on doing that free trial. So it definitely makes sense after 2 or 3 months, like once you get through that free trial period and start getting those contracts. And I would say like our close rate with the free trial is over 50%, maybe even over 80%. So definitely does kind of work in how you said that, you give free stuff and they're like really, really see the value or just like really appreciative of it. But the other part of it is, that we're really picky with the clients that we choose for this program. Kind of like
You'd
I said, we
have to
only
be.
take
You'd
one
have
a
to be.
month. Yeah, they have to be a good fit. They have to have like a certain amount of hours that we need for them a month. And being really picky with just like who is in the program, I think is also an important part of making something like this work. So you're not just getting people who want a free month of services and you're never going to see again type of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You definitely don't want people just taking advantage, but that's why you're so choosy. So yeah, that makes sense. That definitely still makes me like I don't know that I would ever do that, but the fact that you're doing it and it's working is people take note. Maybe this is a model that's worth looking into. I think you have to be very confident that your service is good enough that anyone would feel dumb not continuing with you afterwards. And obviously, you are confident in that, and so you clearly have a good service. So very, very cool. From an operational standpoint, since you basically have similar services, but since they're for two completely different ICPs and they are going to differ in some ways with the deliverable and the flow, operationally, what does that look like? Do you have two separate teams? Is it the same team? Do you have different sets of processes being followed? I'm just really curious, as a former COO and president myself, and kind of designing the workflow of my agency. I'm curious how that looks in the back end.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, right now where we're at, it's usually the owners, myself and Samantha's the other co-owner, who like take the lead on doing that free trial period. One reason is because we can work so much faster than even like some of our other team members can. And then the other part of it is once all the campaigns and strategy are set up, it's a lot easier for someone who might be a little bit more junior to kind of like take over and just like basically copy what's already working. And then on top of that, I guess we have like a very good project management system and organization system, so people don't have to spend 30 minutes looking for assets and like landing pages and things like that. So just making sure that everything's tight in terms of saving our team time, like organization wise, and then, like I said, taking the lead on that free trial and really showing the client how how to set up the campaigns from the beginning, but also just logistical stuff, how like tight and clean that can be. That's what really has allowed us to use the program efficiently. And at some point I can see someone taking the free trials over who's like, really senior on our team, maybe down the road that we make a hire for that. But I kind of like this model of the owners diving in because there's always that other thing for a lot of agency models where you speak to the owners, the salespeople, or like, the director of paid media. And then once you get in, you're given to like the interns or like the entry level employees from day one. And so that's kind of something we definitely wanted to do different and just let clients know that like you are working with us, the owners, and like we're very involved and we might step away after 2 or 3 months once things have kind of been locked in. But we're still always there, like looking at things and, not going to be just a sales face to talk to at the beginning.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, so it kind of gives you a bit of a almost like a white glove handoff in a way where you have that. Well, I guess one phrase that we were using at the agency when we were first designing our new and improved sort of onboarding process and onboarding expectations is the term we were using was continuity of care, because that is a huge criticism that so many clients, brands, prospects, etc., have and are continually voicing either to the agency themselves, or at least they're screaming into the void and on LinkedIn talking about, don't you hate it how it's the best, it's either the owner or the best specialist on the team that closes you, and then they hand you off to a junior person who knows nothing about your business.
Yeah.
And just based on how most agencies are run, I mean that is super super common. So it sounds like you've found kind of a creative way around that, where you have that sort of continuity of care, where Chris is at the start. Oh, and Chris is actually still at the beginning, and he's going to make sure that everything is running smoothly as it should be before he hands it off to somebody else who will then just take it and run with it and make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And not, and kind of like you said with the handoff, like that's like the biggest disconnect I see on a lot of agency teams. They're just not even sending notes to the people, or even if they do, they may just not have enough time before that onboarding call to really go over it. And then you're spending, 45 minutes on that first onboarding call or first, strategy call, going over things that they actually found out during the discovery sales part of it. And that just like initial meeting can get clients pretty frustrated that maybe they aren't detail oriented, maybe they're not all like very connected. And we found that, or I saw that when I was working, in an office setting. So the fact that we can do it in a very remote environment, just makes me like really, really happy, but also that like it's super achievable for, any type of agency, whether your employees are all over the world or whether you are in an office setting.
It is super achievable. Here's the thing about all of these things that we chat about a lot on this podcast, and I post on LinkedIn, and that brands and clients in general complain about, is that all of these things are all super super achievable, and none of these things are complex. I think that because they can feel difficult when they snowball, as an agency owner, like there's always problems, there's always multiple
Yeah.
fires. And so you can start to tell yourself the lie that I can't solve this problem because it's complex. When in reality, you're probably just stressed out because there's always a lot of problems. The reality of what you just said, yes, it's completely achievable, and in fact, it's actually very very simple. I think the one thing that a lot of people, a lot of agency owners specifically, the where they find themselves is they find themselves in a reactive mode. So when you're in a reactive
Mhm.
mode, you're not presenting new problems to the overall root cause. You're just solving the symptoms of the one problem that's popped up right now. Whereas if you say, hey, let's design this onboarding. Actually, scratch that. Let's not just design the onboarding. Let's design the entire client experience from the point that they are a prospect and our salesperson is talking to them to their first year with us.
Mhm.
What are all of the points that we see being milestones? What are all the points where the ball could get dropped and could negatively affect us? Where are all the points where we want to celebrate, and how do we want them to feel, you know, in the when they sign the contract? How do we want them to feel in the kickoff call? How do we want them to feel after month one? And you just kind of go through and design it. And if you have a roadmap laid out, then it's like, oh well, let's just stick to that. Oh, the new clients on board. Okay, so I need to have the salesperson on because it's the kickoff. Okay, but before the kickoff, I need to actually sit down with the salesperson, and I just need a brain dump. Let me just get everything, because he's probably not writing everything in his notes because he's hopping, or he or she is hopping from one meeting to another to another. Let's just sit down and just give me all of the stuff, because I don't want to look like an idiot when I meet this client for the first time. You don't want me to look like an idiot, because then you're not going to get your commission because they're going to leave.
Yeah.
It's just like proactively designing the entire system, because, like you said, it's actually really really achievable. There's nothing complex about it. It's just being like intentional.
And kind of how you were just outlining it, it's very similar to like a product experience when you like buy just like a physical product
Yes.
type of thing and you get those reminder emails, or you get like a nice, thank you for, buying our product. Here's like a nice new offer type of thing. Obviously, like the agency version of that is a little bit more complicated and there's a lot more like, things that you have to be mindful of, but it's similar in that if you don't have, an outline or plan for what that looks like, what that customer experience looks like, um, then you're going to miss on a lot of things, and it's just not going to feel like you're taking care of that client in the same way.
It's really funny. It's really really typical, but the advice that agencies give clients is
Yeah.
far and above, so much better than what they actually implement for themselves. So if you, and it doesn't matter if you serve, again, like DTC e-commerce clients, but you yourself are an agency.
Mhm.
Humans are humans. Human psychology is the
Exactly.
same. We all kind of react in very similar ways. We're all kind of predictable. We like to pretend that we're all, unique unicorns, but we're not. We're kind of pre-programmed to react in certain ways. And the idea, like, if you can give that person that advice, now let's actually turn that advice towards yourself and be like, oh, okay, I should probably do this for myself as well. Because exactly like you said, it's like the product journey. Like well, you know what though? I mean, a service, a product, at the end of the day, it's something that a person with feelings and wants and desires and pain points is purchasing, and they want a benefit out of it.
Yeah,
Full stop.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, you got it perfect. And then one other little thing I want to bring up is kind of like the reactionary mode a lot of agency owners do get into with all this, and that's kind of like why they don't have the time for it. Like we've put a lot of effort into organizing all of our processes before you really get to that scale where we, aren't having time to redo things, especially when you have, a team of 5 to 10 people and you're like, okay, we actually have to redo how we do onboarding, or we have to have like all our notes in like the same, centralized place. And not only is it hard to build out a process when you have so many fires you're burning out, but like to retrain the employees who have already come in to like whatever, that environment is, to like have them do something completely different. That's also a whole nother like time taking thing that like I feel like a lot of people don't really like realize in the beginning until they really get into it. And I see a lot of people recommend that like, oh, you should just like, try to sell business and then like figure it out later. And obviously there is like a point to making enough revenue so you can actually build things out and like keep your business alive. But I don't think you should ever do it when it's gonna put you in a bad situation where you're like giving bad services or just like everything isn't tight, or you're just like, even losing money because you're like overexerting your time on activities that like could be, 2 to 3 hours shorter if you just had like an SOP or the right processes for it.
100%. Basically, don't sell vaporware. Like
Yeah.
sell something that's actually there. This is, I might go in a bit of a rant here. I'll try to taper
No,
it,
go
but
for it.
so I recently started to put together a school course on agency operations and scaling, just because the more the more agency courses that I see pop up, the more I'm just kind of disgusted at the training that's out there and the content that is out there, because it's generally what people are being taught, and I'm meeting people who have done this and they're having a really hard time. Is it's being taught, here's how you sell social media marketing. Once you get your first 5 to 10 social media marketing clients, then you can learn social media marketing yourself, or hire outside talent. And basically these people are coming to it from a very dishonest view, where like you're not actually in this world at all. And that's fine if you want to buy into a business that's already running, but if you're selling something that you have no comprehension of at all, unless every single person that is saying yes I want that knows about that, you're actually being incredibly dishonest, and you should go work for somebody first.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
that 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 whole that whole sell it and then build it, that only works if you've already done the thing many times before. If you've never done it before, just please go work for somebody, or just sit down. Just don't do it, because you're giving all of us agencies a really bad name.
Really a terrible name. Yeah. And like that's the hardest thing, like selling to like owners, like direct brand owners, is they have this like stigma about agencies or had so many bad experiences. And honestly, like we work with a lot of like medium and small businesses. We've kind of like stepped away from the small businesses a little bit, but those are the owners who I see like get burned so much by things like that, because they don't know like what questions to ask or like what to really look for, like some of like the bigger brands do at that point. But just
Yeah.
in general, like a lot of owners' attitude of like, I don't trust this marketing team, or like I'm gonna, do my own research to validate what they're saying, comes from exactly what you said. People just like selling things without actually knowing like how to do it themselves.
Yeah, 100%. That's not to say that the majority of agencies out there aren't actually doing things in their client's best interest. They
Hmm.
are. It's just it's the small minority that gives everybody else a bad name. So, yeah. Well, what are some unique strategies that you found in your specific niche that have worked really well?
I think lately something that's been interesting is, so like UGC content's always been like a really big thing for D2C companies, and or at least the past like year or two, and it's gotten to a point where it's like a lot of people would say it's like oversaturated. And a lot of that comes from people just kind of like stealing scripts, like all the AI stuff, and just downloading what people are saying, and then just like getting kind of anyone to say that. Or I guess like another way of saying it is they're not really thoughtful about tailoring it for their own needs. And then so all of a sudden you have, 80% of UGC ads starting with the same hook, have the same body, end with the same CTA. And then it's very easy for consumers to spot like what a UGC ad is now, instead of it just being like an authentic review, which is, where it kind of like started from. So we've actually done is kind of like moved a little bit more towards like the, I guess, Photoshop, really like high end photo type of thing, but combining that with social and UGC editing elements. So, for example, like there's that thing a lot of people say about UGC where you should be like switching the scene like every 1.5 seconds or something like that to keep people's attention. So we did that with these very like close-up shots of this handbag company that we work with. And then after like every 4 or 5 shots, we had just like a stock footage. We got like the most real looking stock people that we could find, which is a little bit difficult, but um then we got those people to kind of be like the person or the UGC person every 4 or 5 shots to kind of like make it feel a little bit more just real in terms of like, people being involved instead of just being product shots. And that campaign or that ad performed like really, really well, had a lot of like engagement and good click-through rates because it was, still had those scroll stopping elements of like social editing that I'll call it, but it was a very different thing that people weren't used to seeing anymore because
Yeah.
there's just all like these UGC talking head videos and things like that. So, and that's what always the biggest thing I've seen with like more of, those companies who just take an ad from the magazine that they ran and like plopping it on social. It's not that the content itself is bad. It's just that it's not formatted for someone who has like a phone directly in front of their face. When you have the visual this close to you, there's a lot of different things that like pop up or that are important that aren't as important when you have a magazine open. You're just like looking at an image right there. So that would be like the biggest thing I would say for people to maybe like look at a little bit more is how to like combine some of these really nice looking assets, really high def photos with more of like a social or authentic editing style. And I think you'd be surprised at kind of like the results you might find from that.
It's really interesting because I've heard from a number of people now on this podcast specifically of how UGC is has already changed. It's already changing now. It's I mean it's so classic in general with social media marketing, but once you find something that works, it's already starting to decline, and now we're having to find new ways to make that thing work. Whether it's a totally different thing or it's a sort of a subtle shift, kind of like what you're mentioning, or something that's maybe a little bit more efficient. It's just always it's so interesting. You always need to keep your ear on the ground, finger on the pulse because it's always changing. A few other questions here. How has the agency changed since you started it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been interesting. Kind of like building it throughout the years and everything. Especially we started I think like right in the middle or kind of like like right near the end maybe of COVID and everything. So it was kind of like an interesting jumping off point. Definitely like was a little nervous at that time, but it's kind of like a lot of us have seen the digital space actually kind of boomed then. So we actually had like more business than I was expecting. But kind of our agency um processes or like the talent that we hire, I think is probably the biggest thing that's changed over the years. Before we were really looking to like outsource that, like internationally or like to like yeah, just like international hiring programs and things like that. And we had like some good hires from that. It wasn't terrible. And I know a lot of agencies, especially white label agencies, who do it like really, really well. But in the end, we just like really valued having someone who was like more 9 to 5 our hours. And like we're really flexible with like people who work for us. They don't have to have a strict 9 to 5 schedule, but still just being able to respond to something that day instead of having to wait like a full 24 hours. And then if
Yeah,
there
that's
are
a huge
things
one.
that they don't understand, it takes, 3 to 4 days just to get all like the communication across type of thing. And then even more than that, I just find media buyers who have worked with US and Canadian companies just have like a little bit better perspective of like what works and what's really important for those clients. So this year, specifically, we made I guess, a value prop of our team's 100% US based, and we really just like made an effort to like find more people in my LinkedIn network, just like references that we have to like put on a list, so when the time comes, we can kind of just like plug them in. Um, and I think the other thing was kind of like I was saying earlier in terms of processes. There was one point about like 2 or 3 years into the agency that we were like scaling like really, really well. And we kind of just had to take like a moment to like take a step back and be like, are we really like built for what we want to do once we're at scale? And we realized we still needed to like put a little couple more pieces together, have better sales decks, have better SOPs, things like that. And just took a lot more time to really refine our product. And I think that was super beneficial. It's just kind of funny to be in this position where I feel like we have like this really cool product that like a lot of people don't necessarily like know about just yet. So that's kind of like our next phase is really focusing on like pushing it out a little bit more and just getting more eyes on like what we're really doing. Um, but yeah, I think talent has probably been the biggest like 180 shift that we've done over the past couple of years.
That's really interesting, and one criticism that I've had with working with white label agencies in the past is just that major lack of that synchronous feel of, I know that if I'm giving this person feedback, they're not going to get it for 12 more hours. And then I'm not going to see that they've gotten it and they've even responded for another 12 hours.
Yeah.
And so you get into this loop where everything just gets slower and slower and slower. So it's having like a local, I guess is the wrong term, but a North American based or American based white label agency. I think that's actually a really interesting USP. And I'm just really curious, when you switched to that, did you get any early feedback?
No, just people that said like we might have like a little bit higher hourly price for things. And so we just had a couple of people say that, oh, the price makes sense because you guys have a 100% US based team and things like that. So definitely gives a little bit more opportunity to have like higher price points and things like that. I mean, the biggest feedback I've gotten is from other white label agencies who have been like, how are you able to like make money off of a
Yeah.
100% US based team?
Yeah.
And I think part of that goes into actually like how we pay our US based employees. We kind of just like pay them on like a flat hourly rate, and they have the opportunity to work as many or as little hours that week as they want. So we have like very entrepreneurial people who are like more concerned about the flexibility of their schedule than necessarily making just like a fixed dollar amount. And a lot of these people might have another business or be doing other things on the side as well. But it gives them the ability to, if they want to grind 60 hours one week and make that hourly rate a lot higher, they could do that. And the next week, if they only want to work 10 hours, that's, totally cool with us too. And it gives them the ability to not have, not be in those agency situations where you're overworked constantly and not really getting paid for it. And in the same sense, it allows us to go back to our clients and really be like strict on like how many hours we're working for them. So it kind of like works on both ends, but just offering that model to our hires has really allowed us to get very entrepreneurial people who are like independent at solving problems and all of that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. I like that. Okay. Well, Chris, I think that this is probably a great off ramp here. I've really enjoyed the conversation here. Where can people find more about you and about Happy Hub Marketing?
Yeah. You can go to our website, happyhubmarketing.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there and honestly would prefer you to kind of like get an idea of what our philosophy is, kind of like how we think about paid media and marketing and all those sorts of things, just to see if we're a good fit. And then just kind of beyond that, I'm always happy to answer questions. So feel free to DM me on LinkedIn. Really, like, no strings attached in any way. Just really want to make sure everyone has, all the knowledge they need to make their marketing campaign successful. And that's enough to make me happy.
Awesome. Me too.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sean. Really appreciated being here and coming on.
Thanks, Chris.